It is 11:47 at night. You are sitting on the edge of your bed, your phone is in your hand, and you are staring at one message. You have already read it 6 times. It is only 3 sentences, but somehow you have spent the last 40 minutes trying to figure out whether you are even allowed to be upset. You read it again, then again, and you start wondering what you did wrong. Maybe your tone was wrong. Maybe you were too sensitive. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe they were actually trying to help you. Then you remember the argument from Tuesday, the silent treatment, the accusation that somehow became your fault, the conversation where you ended up apologizing for something you did not even believe you had done. And then you notice something even stranger. You are not thinking about whether they were wrong. You are thinking about whether you are crazy for thinking they were wrong. That distinction matters, because when a relationship repeatedly teaches you to distrust your own perception, the damage does not end when the argument ends. It follows you into your bedroom. It follows you into your friendships. It follows you into your next relationship. It follows you into the quiet moments when nobody is telling you what to think. And eventually you find yourself asking a question that would have sounded ridiculous to you 2 years ago. Why do I not trust myself anymore? That is where this begins. There is something about narcissistic abuse that almost nobody notices while they are still inside it. You can lose something without realizing it is disappearing. Not your money, not your house, not even the relationship itself. You can lose your confidence in your own reality, and there is a very simple way to begin seeing it. Take a piece of paper. Write down who you were before the relationship. Then write down who you believe you are now. Do not write what they say about you. Write what you believe about yourself. Your intelligence, your appearance, your ability to make decisions, your friendships, your judgment, your right to say no, your ability to trust your memory, your ability to leave. Then compare the 2 versions, because that difference can tell you something. It will not diagnose you. It will not prove that someone has narcissistic personality disorder. It will not prove that every painful relationship was narcissistic abuse. But it can reveal what the relationship has done to you. And sometimes the most revealing sign is not what the other person did. It is what you slowly stopped believing about yourself. The confusing thing about narcissistic abuse is that it rarely begins looking like abuse. Sometimes it begins looking like the opposite. It begins with attention, affection, constant messages, gifts, compliments, long conversations at 2 in the morning, promises about the future. You feel chosen. You feel understood. You feel special. And maybe they tell you something you have secretly wanted to hear for years. I have never connected with anyone like this. That intensity can feel like proof that the relationship is extraordinary. But intensity is not the same thing as intimacy, and affection is not the same thing as emotional safety. The pattern can change slowly. A disagreement becomes an accusation becomes punishment. The punishment teaches you what subjects are dangerous. Then you stop bringing those subjects up. You stop seeing certain people. You stop expressing certain opinions. You stop doing certain things. Not necessarily because they explicitly told you to, but because you learned what happens when you do not. That is why this subject requires more than a list of behaviors. You have to look at the effect. What happened to you? What changed inside you? And why? By the end of this, you will have 10 signs you can examine in your own experience. You will understand why you may feel like you are walking on eggshells, why you may struggle to trust people, why making ordinary decisions can suddenly feel impossible, why you may no longer recognize the person you were before the relationship, and why the effects can remain even after the relationship ends. But there is another part of this that I want you to hear. Because sometimes the person who hurt you is not the only person who makes you doubt your experience. Sometimes your friends heard their story first. Sometimes your family believes the charming version. Sometimes people tell you to forgive because they never experience what happened behind closed doors. And sometimes something even more painful happens. You start doing their job for them. You begin silencing yourself before they even have to. You start questioning yourself before they can question you. Stay with me. Narcissistic abuse is not simply somebody being selfish. It is not every argument. It is not every person with confidence. And it is not a diagnosis you can make because somebody hurt your feelings. The useful question is different. Instead of asking, is this person a narcissist? Ask, what is happening to me inside this relationship? Are you becoming smaller? Are you becoming quieter? Are you becoming afraid? Are you losing your friends? Are you constantly apologizing? Are you beginning to doubt memories you once trusted? Are you changing your behavior simply to prevent another person's reaction? That is where the pattern becomes important. My grandmother used to say that you can tell whether a house is healthy by what happens when the door closes. The same principle applies to relationships. Public charm tells you very little. Watch what happens when nobody is watching. Watch what happens when you say no. Watch what happens when you disagree. Watch what happens when you succeed. Watch what happens when you need something. Because the real test of a relationship is not how someone treats you when everything goes their way. It is how they treat you when it does not. If you are trying to understand your own experience, start recording reality. Not obsessively, not as ammunition, not because you need to build a legal case against someone. Write down what happened. Write the date. Write what was said. Write what happened immediately afterward. And write how you felt before the interaction and after it. That is enough. You may discover patterns you could not see while you were emotionally inside them. I am not going to tell you that you need a special system. You do not. A notebook is enough. Your phone is enough. A few honest sentences are enough. The purpose is not to prove that somebody else is evil. The purpose is to stop abandoning your own memory. I will not come back to this again, but remember it. The 10 signs. Sign 1. It felt perfect in the beginning. Think about the beginning, not the version you tell people now, the real beginning. Maybe they sent you messages every morning. Maybe they wanted to know everything about you. Maybe they told you that you were different from everyone else. Maybe they talked about the future after only a few weeks. Maybe you received gifts. Maybe you were constantly praised. Maybe you felt like you had finally found somebody who truly saw you. This is where love bombing can become confusing, because later, when the affection disappears, you do not simply miss the person. You miss the version of the person you met at the beginning. You think, I know they can be wonderful. I have seen that side of them. Maybe if I do the right thing, I can get that person back. And that hope can keep somebody trapped for a very long time. The honest limitation is this: a powerful beginning does not prove narcissistic abuse. Some healthy relationships begin intensely. The pattern afterward is what matters. Sign 2, you walk on eggshells. Now pay attention to your body. Do you know their mood before they speak? Do you hear the front door and immediately analyze the sound? Do you notice how they put their keys down? Do you change the subject because you know where the conversation is going? Do you rewrite messages before sending them? Do you rehearse simple sentences? You are not simply being considerate. You may be monitoring danger. Healthy consideration says, I care about how this person feels. Walking on eggshells says, I must control how this person feels or something bad will happen. Those are not the same thing. And if you spend most of your emotional energy managing another person's reactions while ignoring your own needs, pay attention. Sign 3, the story changed after the relationship. Then the relationship ends. You think the hardest part is over, and suddenly people start calling. I heard what happened. They said you were controlling. They said you were unstable. They said you were the one who ruined everything. Now you are defending yourself to people who were not there. This can become a smear campaign. Not every breakup involves one, but when someone repeatedly twists events, recruits other people into the conflict, or presents themselves as the only victim, the consequences can become devastating. You may feel desperate to correct every lie. But here is the trap. The more desperately you defend yourself, the more emotional you appear. And then your emotion becomes proof that something is wrong with you. You do not have to convince everyone. Write down what happened, protect your support system, and choose carefully who gets access to your story. Sign 4, you feel isolated. Look around your life. How many people could you call tonight? Not followers, not coworkers, not people who simply know your name. People who know enough about your life to notice when something is wrong. Has that number become smaller? Maybe your partner disliked your friends. Maybe family gatherings always caused conflict. Maybe every person who questioned the relationship eventually became toxic. Maybe talking about the relationship created another argument. Eventually, you stop talking. Not because everything is fine, because explaining it has become exhausting. That is how isolation works. Sometimes nobody locks the door. You simply become too tired to walk through it. And when your world gets smaller, the other person's influence becomes larger. Sign 5, you do not trust yourself. This may be one of the most important signs. You remember the conversation. They say it never happened. You remember what they promised. They say you misunderstood. You remember being hurt. They say you are too sensitive. You remember the exact words. They say you imagined them. Eventually, you stop asking what happened and start asking, can I trust my own memory? That is what repeated gaslighting can do. The argument moves away from their behavior. Now the argument is about whether your perception is legitimate. And once that happens, the original issue disappears. Do not obsess over proving every memory, but do not automatically surrender it either. Sign 6, you start sabotaging yourself. Now the damage moves inward. You stop applying for the job. You stop pursuing the dream. You stop creating. You stop exercising. You stop seeing friends. You stop believing you deserve better. And then something even more dangerous can happen. The critical voice becomes your own. You are stupid. You always ruin everything. Nobody else would want you. You cannot do this. You hear their voice even when they are not in the room. That is the moment you need to pay attention, because psychological abuse can become internalized. And if your situation includes urges to hurt yourself or thoughts of suicide, do not handle that alone. Reach out to someone you trust. Contact a qualified mental health professional. And if you are in immediate danger, seek urgent help where you live. You do not have to prove that your pain is serious enough before you deserve support. Sign 7, your body feels the danger. Sometimes your mind understands what is happening before your body does. Your stomach tightens, your sleep changes, your appetite changes, you feel exhausted, your muscles remain tense, your heart races when your phone rings. You hear a particular tone of voice and your body reacts before your mind catches up. Chronic stress can affect the body. But be careful here. Not every headache is trauma. Not every stomach problem is abuse. Not every sleepless night has one psychological explanation. Take persistent physical symptoms seriously. Get them evaluated. Your body deserves care, not assumptions. Sign 8. Your boundaries keep collapsing. You say, I am not answering that call. Then you answer. I am not going back. Then you go back. I will not tolerate being spoken to that way. Then you spend an hour explaining why you did not mean it. Why? Because perhaps your boundaries were repeatedly punished. Every no created anger. Every limit created guilt. Every attempt to leave created pressure. Eventually, your nervous system learned boundaries are dangerous. So rebuilding them can feel wrong at first. You say no and feel guilty. You create distance and feel cruel. You stop explaining yourself and feel selfish. That feeling does not necessarily mean you are doing something wrong. Sometimes it means you are doing something unfamiliar. Sign 9. You do not know who you are anymore. What music did you stop listening to? Which friends disappeared? Which hobbies became stupid? Which clothes stopped feeling acceptable? Which opinions became dangerous? Which dreams became embarrassing? You adapted. Then you adapted again. Then again. Eventually, you became an expert at keeping the peace. You knew what made them happy. You knew what made them angry. You knew which subjects were safe. You knew which version of yourself they preferred. But you stopped knowing what you preferred. That is the loss of identity. And rebuilding it does not require one enormous transformation. It begins with tiny choices. Choose the restaurant you actually want. Call the friend you miss. Listen to the music you love. Take the walk you keep postponing. Wear something because you like it. Small choices rebuild an internal compass. Sign 10. You cannot make decisions anymore. Now imagine being completely alone. Nobody is criticizing you. Nobody is correcting you. Nobody is telling you what you did wrong. And still, you cannot decide. Should I send the message? Should I leave? Should I stay? Was I wrong? Was I too harsh? Should I apologize? Should I try again? This is what repeated criticism can produce. You begin outsourcing your judgment. You ask 5 people. You search the internet. You look for one more opinion. You wait for somebody else to tell you what you already know. So start small. Do not begin with the biggest decision of your life. Make one small decision without asking permission, then another, then another. You do not need to become perfect. You need to become capable of trusting yourself again. Beat 8, the 3 objections. Now I know what you may be thinking, but what if I am just too sensitive? Maybe sometimes you are. Everyone is. But sensitivity does not explain a repeated pattern of humiliation, intimidation, manipulation, isolation, or punishment for having ordinary needs. But what if they really loved me? They may have. A person can have feelings for you and still behave in damaging ways. Love does not automatically make behavior safe. And the third question is the one I hear most often. What if they are not actually a narcissist? Then they are not. You do not need a diagnosis to recognize that something is hurting you. You do not need a psychological label to establish a boundary. You do not need an expert to give you permission to leave a relationship that is damaging you. Stop making the label the requirement. Look at the pattern. Look at the effect. Look at who you are becoming. Now think about who benefits when you remain confused. Not through some grand conspiracy. There does not need to be a secret meeting. The mechanism is much simpler. The person benefits when you doubt yourself. The relationship benefits when you stay quiet. The social circle benefits when nobody has to confront an uncomfortable truth. And sometimes, even you benefit temporarily, because admitting what happened can force you to change your life. It can mean leaving. It can mean disappointing people. It can mean rebuilding friendships. It can mean admitting that the person you loved is not the person you hoped they would become. Confusion has a cost. Silence has a cost. Isolation has a cost. And the longer you remain disconnected from your own judgment, the greater that cost becomes. There is no need to invent a conspiracy. The plain truth is enough. A relationship that repeatedly makes you smaller is already charging you something. There is a point where you need to stop asking, why did I let this happen? Because that question can become another weapon against yourself. You stayed because you loved someone. You stayed because you remembered the beginning. You stayed because you believed people could change. You stayed because you had children. You stayed because you were financially dependent. You stayed because leaving felt more frightening than staying. You stayed because someone slowly trained you to believe the problem was you. Human beings adapt to environments. That is not weakness, that is survival. But survival is not supposed to be your permanent address. You are allowed to become someone who does not need to earn basic respect. You are allowed to disagree without being punished. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to have friends. You are allowed to remember something differently. You are allowed to leave a conversation. You are allowed to change your mind. You are allowed to become yourself again. I am not asking you to become cold. I am asking you to become clear. So here's what I want you to do. Take 10 minutes, get a piece of paper, draw a line down the middle. On the left, write who I was. On the right, write who I became. Then write the differences. Did you stop seeing friends? Did you stop trusting yourself? Did you become afraid of disagreement? Did you stop making decisions? Did you change your personality to keep somebody happy? Did you stop doing things that made you feel alive? Did your world become smaller? Now write one thing you want back. Only one. Do not try to rebuild your entire life tonight. Take one piece back. Call the friend. Play the music. Take the walk. Make the decision. Set the boundary. Then imagine the opposite of the life you have been living. You wake up and your first thought is not about somebody else's mood. You send a message without rewriting it 12 times. You meet a friend without worrying what somebody will think. You walk into a room without scanning every face for danger. You make a decision and trust yourself enough to live with it. You hear your own thoughts again. That is not selfishness. That is recovery. Now I want you to tell me something. Are you still inside the relationship? Are you recently out? Or are you already rebuilding yourself after it ended? You do not have to share names. You do not have to reveal anything identifying. Just tell us where you are in the process. And if one of these 10 signs describes something you experienced, tell us which one. Your comment may become the sentence somebody else needed to read tonight. You may be helping someone understand that they are not alone. But there is one more part of this subject that we have not touched, and it involves something incredibly ordinary: a notebook, a phone, a few dates, and one question you can ask yourself after every confusing interaction. It takes less than 5 minutes. It does not require confrontation. It does not require an argument. And it can reveal patterns long before you are emotionally ready to admit what those patterns mean. People have used versions of this simple practice for years whenever memory becomes difficult to trust. And once you understand exactly what to record, you may start seeing the relationship differently. That is the next step. Tonight, put the phone down for a few minutes. Take one slow breath and write down one thing you know about yourself that nobody else gets to redefine. You do not have to rebuild your entire life tonight. Take back one small piece of your reality. Then take another tomorrow. And remember, the people who built this country with their hands knew things we are only just starting to remember.